Good evening and welcome to Night Markets. This evening I'm joined by a friend and collaborator, Dr. Morne Mostert, who spends a lot of time thinking about mindset. This evening we're going to be talking about what a family mindset could look like and how relevant that is when we want to talk about family strategy. Morne, welcome to Night Markets.
Great to be with you, Gerrit.
Morne, so we've been talking about mindsets, I almost want to say before mindsets were top of mind. I think one of the collaborations that was perhaps most meaningful for me, early stage, many years ago now, was the work we did to challenge mindsets around strategic philanthropy.
Yes.
Together, you and I, with the team at Stellenbosch University, invented design thinking for philanthropy.
That's right.
Which saw the contribution of natural theme to academia, which has gone on to sort of form its own area of research. Please tell me, your shift now, I can say it's a shift, right? I'm talking to a futurist. But your research has shifted now and focused in the cognitive sciences, looking specifically at mindsets. Am I correct?
Yes, that's exactly right. So for the last number of years, I've been working in decision-making sciences and specifically with an attempt to make a contribution to thinking methodologies, systems thinking, futures thinking, and so on. And in the last few years, I've really focused on this idea of mindset. It's a topical, global issue. Many talk about it, very few have done any real work behind it. So I thought it was necessary.
And what's quite interesting about that is, I think, just from the get-go, I think if you had to ask 3 different people, what does mindset mean? You'd probably get 4 different answers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it's become a very popular kind of idea, and I think most people have the view of its kind of original notion, which is an inclination of your mind.
Yes.
That you're sort of heading in a certain direction with your mind, which is not a bad place to start, but of course there's so much more to it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you have to have come across by now is also this idea that the mind is set.
Yes.
And this is it. It's unchallengeable, and this is just the mindset.
Yeah, I'd love to take credit for making that idea famous. That's one way of thinking about mindset, that your mind is set, that it's fixed. It was really Carol Dweck in 2007 who made that idea well known, that you could have a fixed mindset or a fluid mindset. But you can think of mindset in various ways, just very broadly. Yeah. So in addition to the idea that it's set, you can think of the notion that you can, in fact, set your mind. Think about the famous Beatle, George Harrison, who said, "I've got my mind set on you."
Right. Nice.
That's the idea that you can target your mind. You can say, here's something I'm going to organize my mind around.
Yes.
You can also think of mindset as the idea that ideas work in sets. So, for example, when you think of the idea of family, there's a set of ideas around that construct, that notion of family, that for some people have a very deep meaning.
Of course.
And then you can finally think of mindset as the idea of calibrating your mind. In other words, you can set your mind the way that you would set, let's say, the volume on a radio.
Right.
You can set your mind to tune in to a certain objective, let's say. And that's the link, by the way, to strategic thinking and futures thinking.
Morne, I think that's so fascinating. And I think one of the big things that you've just touched on there very quickly is the idea that also mindsets can change.
Very much so.
So this is something that I quite enjoy, is this idea that we are a product of our life experiences, good and bad.
Yes.
This can certainly inform us to rethink. Rethink specific mindsets. Rethink a primary mindset. How if we had to just sort of discuss this in layman's terms, does one have a primary mindset?
Yes.
Or is it sort of mindset with a view to application in specific instances?
It's very interesting. Our view is that we all have a default mindset.
Right.
So when you think, for example, of the notion I mentioned earlier of ideas operating in sets and the mind operating in sets, if I say Donald Trump or China or family, there's an immediate kind of set of ideas that rise up. So most people have a default mind set. And we can talk a little bit about where that comes from, but you're exactly right that it comes from our experiences and to some degree our own decisions. But we view the evolution of mindset something like this. We say that you have a set of experiences. Those experiences really have created stimuli for your mind,
Right, yes.
which have stimulated you to the point where you've created a set of ideas that you use as guiding principles.
Yes.
So, for example, if you're born into a certain family, you're going to see certain norms and standards there, and your mind is going to organize around those. But you're exactly right that the mind can shift.
Yes.
And sometimes we want it to shift a little bit more because it's too static.
Yes.
And sometimes we want it to not shift too much so that it doesn't divert from where we're going in the first place.
Morne, that's extremely interesting. And I think the way that I like to approach things is I always take sort of like a first principles approach. I want to break it down to bolts.
Yeah.
Could we, at the risk of oversimplification, reduce what you've said into a three-part model? Let's call it, say, correct me if I'm wrong here, mindset, decision-making, behavior.
Yes, I think that's a sensible way of thinking about it, because if we just flip that model around for a moment, what we observe, of course, is behavior.
Yes.
And so when systems like family organizations want to organize themselves in a certain direction, they often start with behavior. So very practically, they'll say, guys, I'm noticing this kind of behavior. I'd prefer it if we have that kind of behavior.
Yes.
Okay. And while that's useful, you have to wonder, why are we exhibiting that behavior in the first place?
Exactly.
And our logic would be, well, it's because of the decisions you make. You make certain kinds of decisions, therefore you behave in a certain way.
Correct.
Okay, but why are you making those decisions in the first place? And that's where we would say that's your mindset. So your mindset, the set of ideas that govern the way that you think, determine your decision-making, and because of what you decide and how you decide, you can observe the behavior. Here's the problem. If you only work on the behavior, it's short-term, and you have to work all day long, every day long. It's much more useful to think about what's the mindset that influences it in the first place.
Morne, I think that's incredible and incredibly insightful, at least. And it's good that you use the word shift right there, because I think a natural pickup point for us is, what is the relevance of this? Why are we connecting mindset to family governance? Because that's the touch point.
Yeah.
Family governance, behavioral finance, effectively, and this mindset topic. If we have to take a macroeconomic perspective and we talk about another shift, the greatest wealth transfer in history is in motion.
Yeah.
Credible numbers, Forbes quantifies this shift at $84 trillion.
Staggering.
This is a shift from generation one to next gen custodians. But here's the kicker. This is a shift within a very complex organization.
Yes.
Every family thinks and decides differently. But do they have an understanding of what the family mindset really is? So we're expecting the greatest wealth transfer in history, in the most complex context, family, to go smoothly without addressing crisply the mindset aspect.
It's an enormous risk. And one might say the greatest risk in the 250,000-year history of humanity. Because you're exactly right. Millennials and now Gen Zs will be unprecedentedly wealthy. And they will behave in relation to their newfound wealth. Now, some of those behaviors will be, to use your language, pro-family, and other behaviors will be anti-family, or worse, family destructive and legacy destructive. In addition to the complexity of the family, perhaps we can just pause on that for a moment.
Sure.
Because as a humble student of complexity, I'm fascinated by what drives that, and I can name just a few of those drivers. The first is the number of elements in the system. So when you think about how a family evolves, from the founder to the next generation, the number of people in the family increases. When the number goes up, the complexity goes up. The second thing that drives the complexity is the interrelatedness. And family, by definition, is about relatedness, connectedness, the quality of the relationship.
A social system.
Indeed, a social system. And so when the connectedness goes up, the complexity goes up. The third thing that drives the complexity is the choice. And the series of choices in terms of behaviors that the next generation is confronted with is an order of magnitude compared to earlier generations. So choices are going up. The next thing that drives complexity is the phenomenon of speed. We now expect everything to happen at breakneck speed. And so when the speed goes up, the complexity goes up. And the last thing that drives the complexity is what we call dematerialization. A little bit tongue-in-cheek, perhaps you can explain this with that great philosopher of the 1990s who wore baggy pants and sang the song "You Can't Touch This." That's MC Hammer, who was explaining the idea that there are certain things you just cannot touch. The point of this is that elements, for example, of family mindset, family culture are intangible, so very different from the way the world was, at least in the first and second industrial revolutions. So when you think at families today, the number is up, the interconnectedness is up, the choices are greater, the speed is higher, and there's greater dematerialization.
And ultimately, the stakes are high.
5 out of 5 on drivers of complexity. Of course, then we introduce rules to calm things down, which we can come to.
Yeah.
But in addition to the complexity of the family, the society in which that family operates also has 5 out of 5 on those drivers. So you have a complex system inside an even more complex system. And the risk of not understanding mindset in that level of complexity means you're making family decisions without insight on how people think. That means you're flying blind.
Morne, I think that is profound. You're flying blind and you're hoping for the best. An idea that I really enjoy of yours is this idea of time will not tell. We must tell time.
That's right.
And I think a way for us to say that this is really actually a workable problem set is to perhaps reduce the very complexity which is this guiding line to possibly a 3-part process. How I see this, or what I want to test on you, is if the sort of standard process here for behavior, to understand behavior, how behavior as an output or as a result occurs, is to say mindset informs decision-making. Decision-making has a result. The result is behavior. But for us to just flip that around and to say, to navigate this change, to help navigate this change, to restore some, to calibrate some kind of context, is to explore this new and uncharted topic of what it could mean to understand and define family mindset, which would inform, I almost want to say, decision-making in context, which would enable pro-family behavior. What I want to say to you is, and I'd love for us to have a sort of discussion about rules to try and hold the system together. If the family is a social system, and if we look at other systems, it's my belief that rules won't keep it together, whatever it is. In our research in family governance at SFO, what we have, again, probably at the risk of oversimplification, what we really believe is that culture, family culture, is the operating system. You can have all the rules you like. If the family is unable to firstly organize as a family, exercise, I want to say, their membership, what good is the family constitution?
I think that's exactly right. You will not be able to policy your way into a perfect social system or a perfect family. It's just not possible. And the evidence is really easy to find. When you look at any social system like a country, think about South Africa. We have a beautiful constitution, a world-leading constitution. Are we a perfect country? I think some might say rather far from it. You can look at any social, look at crime around the world.
Yeah.
It's people don't commit crime because it's legal. There's a very explicit set of rules that say you're not allowed to do that, and yet it happens. So social systems need more than rules. The reality in social systems is also that most behaviors are unruled and unrulable. And the reason for that is that mechanisms like constitutions only refer to what can be observed. But remember my principle of MC Hammer.
Yes.
You can't touch this. It's dematerialized, which means that 90% and more of family behavior cannot be reduced to a rule. That means something else has to govern it. And there's an interesting connection to family governance. So that governance framework has a hard, visible, tangible element, but it has this tacit dimension of the tacit rules, the implicit rules, the intangible rules, which operate at the fundamental operating system of the family, and that's the mindset. And the fascinating thing, Gerrit, is perhaps it's worth saying that with some colleagues now over the last few years, we've developed a world first in the scientific assessment of mindset. And we have an opportunity now for the first time to define exactly what a family mindset might be through the Mindset Index.
Morne, that is really fascinating. And I think perhaps one of the most valuable points in this discussion so far is you touching on the explicit and implicit nature of things. If I had to explain to someone what I mean by pro-family behavior, I think one of the things that I want to just flag here as a problem is the idea that we typically have around family, that it is this, just look at the typical publication, look at the typical financial services marketing material around family. Family is not perfect. Being messy, being human is messy business.
Absolutely.
So this idea, and it's sort of the central metaphor we use in-house, the idea of family is not birds flying in a perfect V. I think this murmuration that you see on screen for me is more telling. It's more honest. The family at best is together organically and is able to shift and navigate change together. And I think where we are going with this conversation and where our collaboration has the potential to produce a really, really meaningful body of work is to recognize the implicit nature of this and to understand that we will not be able to get to second base. It's thinking about the greatest wealth transfer in history, relying on rules when families are typically not even on the same page.
Yes. In fact, the murmuration is so fascinating because of this kind of shared mindset that exists in that murmuration. And it's implicit. You know, the birds don't study a constitution before they start flying. In the same way, the family governance must, I would argue, include an insight into that family mindset, or to quote again in reference to the idea of murmuration, you're flying blind, which means that you're going into this hyper-complex space. And let's face it, many people are feeling that all around the world. There are so many changes happening. People are feeling a little bit lost. Going into this hyper-complex space with a navigation system that is extremely limited. It's almost like trying to decide where to sail your yacht. And all you have is, we're going to try not to drown, and we're going to try and keep the sails up as often as we can. Good luck getting to the right destination. You need a little bit more in that navigation system.
Absolutely.
And mindset offers that insight, which helps you to peer into the mind, if you like. But the mind, really fascinating because it is, in a sense, one of the vastly unexplored frontiers. like space in a way. And you have this fascinating idea that, space is distant and the mind is so close, and yet we know so little about it. So the mindset offers a navigation framework for decision-making. Now, that pro-family behavior. Pro-family behavior on our process here means pro-family decision-making.
Yes.
And we've already agreed the decision-making comes from the mindset. So therefore, we need to understand what is the pro-family mindset.
100%.
As a result of which we can make pro-family decisions, as a result of which we can get pro-family behavior.
Exactly. Would you believe me if I told you that some of the most brutal arguments, I'm talking about energy in meetings, family meetings that I have been exposed to, is about my brother can fly business class, I had to fly economy. This is what's getting energy in meetings. One of the problems that we have is almost this perceived inequitability. And what that then drives, if we are talking pro-family behavior, is, I almost want to say, contra-family behavior.
A family mindset is as unique as an individual fingerprint. Wouldn't you rather know what that is?